Hello, everyone, and welcome to the penultimate webinar in our series on AI and information literacy. My name is Megan Kowalski. I am the Outreach and Reference Librarian for the UDC Library. I will be handling the logistics for today's event. We will have time for questions at the end, both recorded and unrecorded, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and I can always let Glenn know as they come up. I am joined today by my colleague, Glenn Benedict, who's going to be handling the content for today's session. So take it away, Glenn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Glenn Benedict. I am the Access Services Librarian here at UDC, and today I'd like to talk to you all about the Information Literacy Standard, Scholarship as a Conversation, and how it relates to AI. So I'd like to talk about scholarship as a conversation, and kind of the two important pieces of sort of, if we examine that metaphor, the conversation, what are the important pieces of it, and how does AI either enhance or detract from students and their ability to implement important parts of that conversation? And so we want to look at both at a student or a researcher's ability to listen, and then to use the use of their own voice. And then I'd also kind of like to talk a little bit about the process of scholarship, and then sort of break it down, and then where does AI kind of fit into that? So that's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. So scholarship as a conversation goes, that particular metaphor goes back to the scholar Kenneth Burke in 1941. And he uses this metaphor of the researcher as somebody who has entered a parlor, has joined a conversation that's already in progress. You get to contribute to the, in Burke's terms, interminable exchange. And then you leave, and then as you're leaving this party, the discussion is still vigorously in progress. And I think this is a really important metaphor for the way research and scholarship gets taught to students. I think students are very familiar with the idea of the debate, and the use of the conversation metaphor, I think, is does a better job of sort of conveying what scholarship is to students, and at the same time, I think, is a much more relaxed metaphor. It is not as confrontational, and it really gives students a chance to understand sort of how they can play a role in scholarship. And so, as I mentioned before, the two elements of a conversation, if you're in the middle of a conversation, it's really important to be a good listener. And it's important to, when you speak, that you're using your own voice. And so I'd like to kind of take a look at those elements of this scholarship as a conversation metaphor and see how AI ties into that. So an interesting thing about listening, so if you think about the listening part of this metaphor is, if you go back to Burke's description, that you kind of hear what the conversation is about. You're getting caught up to all the points that have already been made. And so we kind of can think of this as sort of the background research, the component of scholarship, that you're getting caught up in what's already been discussed about whatever topic the student is interested in. And there was actually a study released last year about the effects of large language models versus a more traditional web search like Google, or even using Wikipedia, and how that impacts the depth of learning that is done by the researcher in this case. And in this study, they found that participants reported developing shallower knowledge from large language model summaries. So if you're relying on AI to do your research for you, to get you caught up in terms of what is being discussed on a particular topic, it's not a very deep pool of knowledge that you're working with. And it's sort of hypothesized that AI summaries are bypassing this really kind of crucial work that you need to build understanding. That even compared to something that maybe, educators frequently warn students against using tools like Wikipedia, but even Wikipedia provides links and they document where all of their information comes from. So even if you don't necessarily want a student to use Wikipedia, it's sometimes just as a good jumping off point because you can kind of get a quick summary, but then Wikipedia also gives you links that you can follow to get more in-depth information, which frequently AI summaries will not do. Um, because these large language models are pulling in a lot of information that they've been trained on, um, they will not necessarily be able to direct you to an exact link to where they got any particular piece of information from. So if you want to, once you've received your summary, it's much easier to jump off of a Wikipedia article or even a Google search if you skip the AI summary than it is if you're relying on that AI summary to do the work for you. Um, they found in this study, they found that participants who used AI summaries were less confident in their own conclusions. Again, probably reflecting that there is just a recognition that the AI is not either giving you all the information or the way that they have cited their sources is not clear. Um, and the participants who used the AI summaries tended to, their conclusions tended to mirror conclusions reached by other AI users. So not only is, in this case, the participants not getting an in-depth summary of a particular topic, but the act then of taking that information and sort of integrating it into your own ideas and beliefs does not seem to be happening as strongly with AI users in this case. And that's really important because that brings us to the next part of the conversation metaphor, which is the voice. And so there's a lot of ways that we always you want to encourage students to bring their own voice. A big thing is about people. Students want to be heard; they want to be seen. But is AI taking away from that? And so you can kind of see on the right here. These were some ads that popped up for me about using. When I was looking up, doing some research on AI and using their voice. So like AI can literally mimic your voice. And so that's not exactly what we're talking about here, but I kind of wanted to show that, for people who are working in creative fields, the AI can literally take your voice. The company, this 11 Labs, on their websites, which is the larger box you'll see, they kept saying, create a replica that sounds like you and that it's your voice. So they seem like they're really marketing towards, a tool for an individual to use their own voice. But the actual ad that they posted said, claims that they can clone any voice. So that's something to keep an eye out for, is as people are already mistrusting information and sources of information and the reliability of information, just the way that AI can mimic authority, even down to an actual voice. But when we're talking about this scholarship and as a conversation and using this metaphor, we're really talking about is these second 2 points, the tone and style of a piece of writing or a piece of content or a piece of scholarly research, and then also perspective. What is the perspective that you're coming to? And like your actual voice, tone and style is mimicable by AI. There was another piece of research that was done where they took several major authors, they put their works into AI, and then had AI generate short stories based on that author's particular style. And they found that readers, both sort of an average everyday reader, but then also readers who had gone through MFA writing programs, actually preferred the AI mimic of a particular style over the original author's work, which was kind of surprising. It may say more about, you know, the way things get taught in MFA writing programs than it does about, the actual quality of AI. But it is something to be aware of, is that having a very distinct tone or very distinct style in your work does not make you immune to sort of an AI mimicry. In fact, it seems to be actually the opposite. Uh, one of the things that they found was that having not just a distinct style, but a sort of transgressive style was actually the hardest for the AI to replicate, which was interesting. It brings us to the last element of voice in this metaphor, which is your perspective. And this isn't mimicable. No AI summary is going to be able to compete with any individual student's lived experience, their education, their interests, their hobbies, all the important things that we think of when about a person that makes up their work and what they do. That all is actually pretty what makes an individual unique. That actually is pretty if an individual is using their particular voice when they're conducting their research, when they're doing their professional writing, that actually is what makes work unique. And so that, I think, is, rather than maybe necessarily encouraging students to branch out and find a particular tone or style, but finding their perspective. And I think that is an important thing to encourage with students. Just as an example of this, being able to mimic a style, I asked ChatGPT to describe scholarship as a conversation in the form of a Shakespearean sonnet. So if you want to, you can kind of pause this video, read through it. It's kind of good. I'm a little surprised by, but take a look. I think that the third verse, I think, is particularly kind of fun and interesting. But yeah, take a look at that. That kind of goes to show, again, how style as something that's replicable is important in how we think about scholarship. And so if we think about the process of scholarship, if we kind of break it down as to what scholarship is, and then maybe an important thing to do is to break it down, and then in the terms of our conversation metaphor, where does AI have a role? So for example, the problem or the question, if you want to find out what is this conversation about, if you're in medicine, maybe the problem is the treatment of a disease or the diagnosis of a condition. There are big questions always under discussion in history and science, in psychology and religion. So these are all big questions that people have, and that scholarship is. These debates and discussions have been going on, since before our students entered academia, and they will continue long after they have left. So if the question is what is the conversation about, into your hypothesis, but AI can't replicate interest in a topic. So while students can use AI to kind of brainstorm, what a student or any researcher finds interesting in a particular topic, is going to be unique to them. And that is, again, something that AI cannot replicate. An AI cannot make you more interested in a topic than you already are. Um, your hypothesis, again, if you're doing your background research, this is a pretty good place for AI. You can use AI to do your research. Again, you always want to be following up with the sources that AI provides. I think we all are familiar with the idea of hallucinated citations at this point, and just the sort of false confidence that AI presents when it gives you answers to questions. But if you're doing research and you need to catch up or summarize large amount of data, there is, I think, a place for AI in this. But then now your actual research, again, AI can't. It may be able to write things for you, but it can't do. It may help you plan your research program, but it's not going to be able to, pass out surveys or poll individuals or do follow-up questionnaires with people. So again, doing your actual research is this is a place where this is your voice, this is your activity, this is your interest, this is your research, and AI can't do it for you. And then, if we're going on to our, your responses, the criticism to your published research, this is the part in the conversation where you stop and you let someone else speak, and then you refine your arguments after you by taking in that feedback. And so I think when you've broken down the process of scholarship into these parts of a conversation, I think it helps, I think, students to really understand where where it is and is not appropriate to use AI. And yeah, so that is just what I wanted to talk about today, is just sort of scholarship as a conversation that the sort of metaphor that's been around in information literacy circles since the 1940s. And how does that metaphor inform the way that students are taught to use AI, what it is there for, and when it is and isn't appropriate? If you would like to get in touch with us, we have email, chats, appointments, which we can do either online or in person. And so, Megan, do we have any questions?
Right now we don't, so let's see if any come in. But I do want to say, it's a great reminder that when you're talking with an AI bot, it can seem like a conversation, but it's not actually a conversation. And so preserving that human voice, particularly for research and all of that, is essential. And so great reminder of that. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I am going to go ahead and stop the recording, which will be posted to our YouTube later today. Thank you again, Glenn.